Hey guys, how's it going? So this week is UFC Fight Night Lopes versus Silva, and I'm going to run through the card and give you guys my picks and predictions for this event. So let's just get straight into it. And opening up the card, we have Rodrigo Sezinando versus Daniil Donchenko. So I already gave my prediction for this one in the UFC 319 prediction video, but to give you a basic rundown, I didn't really like the fact that Sezinando was very reliant on his grappling. He had a good first performance. His second one was a little bit more concerning against Aaron Creed, and it went down to a really close decision. And that was just basically because Sezinando, outside the wrestling, really didn't have anything else to his game. Meanwhile, Daniil Donchenko has just looked absolutely dominant in all his performances. On the feet, he is one of the best strikers in the season, with a lot of knockout power, really dangerous. And that's how I saw this fight going. Sezinando would present a bit of a threat with the wrestling, but if at any point on the feet Donchenko caught him, I think it would be very quickly finished after that. So for that reason, I went with Daniil Donchenko by round 2 TKO. More elaboration in that previous video, but we'll move on to the next fight. Next up on the card, we have Montserrat Rendon versus Alice Pereira. So Rendon got a good win in her debut against Tamires Vidal, where it did go to a split decision, pretty close fight. It ultimately came down to a second swing round that Rendon just managed to take through, looking that little bit better on the feet. Almost submitted Vidal in that round as well. She is pretty well rounded. Ultimately took that split decision, but her fight after that was way less dominant. Against Daria Zelezniakova, she got outstruck badly round to round. Every round on the feet she was getting outperformed and hit with some massive shots. She was finding success in the wrestling early. She was actually getting the wrestling off quite easily in the first and a little bit in the second, but as the fight went on, she just started losing those takedowns, not getting them as often, ultimately losing a 29-28 through getting beat up on the feet round to round. Not the best of performances, pretty bad look. Her opponent, Alice Pereira, not the longest record. She only has 5 professional fights in her career, but all 5 of them have been pretty good so far. Quite a few of them have been first round finishes. She has demonstrated some really good striking on the feet, some real power in her hands, and also in the grappling she is quite competent, especially when it comes to top position and ground and pound. And while Rendon is very solid, does present that takedown threat and wrestling threat, I think she will be slightly better on the ground in this fight. If the fight doesn't get taken to the ground and Pereira keeps it standing, I could see Pereira absolutely teeing off on Rendon. She has some really nice striking, Pereira, so I'm going to go with Alice Pereira for this one. I'm going to say by a decision win. Next up on the card, we have Alessandro Costa versus Alden Coria. So Alessandro Costa most recently picked up a really good win over Kelvin at UFC 301, where after a decently competitive first round, Costa just started landing these bigger and bigger calf kicks, mainly at the end of the first and at the start of the second, that eventually managed to drop Borjas with these constant calf kicks. And then he dived in, finished the fight with ground and pound early in the second round. Really impressive win there. Before that, he did fight Steve Erceg at UFC 295, where Erceg did take a pretty clear 29-28 decision through just looking better in the striking consistently, mainly in rounds 1 and 3. Costa did manage to take the second with his grappling, but it was very close on the ground as well, and he couldn't really overcome that striking of Erceg, ultimately losing that fight. Despite that loss, though, Alessandro Costa is very solid. He's very well rounded. He had a very dominant win over Jimmy Flick, where he beat up on Flick in the first, knocked him down with leg kicks early on. His leg kicks are really nasty. And then in the second, ended up getting in top position very early and just finishing the fight with some big ground and pound. His opponent for this fight, Alden Coria, is 10-3 in his professional career with runs at both LFA as well as recently in Fury. And throughout his career, he has demonstrated pretty strong well-roundedness. He has a few finishes with ground and pound, a few with submissions. I think he does work better on the ground. And despite Coria's decently impressive record, I think Costa is a really talented fighter. He only loses to some of the best flyweights, and anyone that isn't really that caliber, he usually gets past pretty easily. And against someone like Coria, who is stepping forward off a lesser known promotion in Fury, I am a little bit worried about how he'll fare with that different skill level, and I think on the feet and on the ground Costa will be that little bit better. So for that reason, I'm going to go with Alessandro Costa for this one. I'm going to say by round 3 TKO. Next up on the card is Zachary Reese versus Sedriques Dumas. So Zachary Reese is coming off a win over Dusko Todorovic, where while it was a good win in itself, it was a lot less dominant than I predicted. Todorovic is really chinny, and I predicted someone like Reese, who is really powerful and nice on the feet, would be able to put him away quite quickly, but it was actually Todorovic who was succeeding very early in the fight, taking Reese down in the first, holding him on bottom position, making him exert a lot of energy trying to get up. And in the later 2 rounds, Reese did win them, but it wasn't anything crazy. He wasn't landing big or impactful. He was really gassed out from the wrestling. Ultimately won a 29-28, but a really bad look for him. His fight before that against Azamat Bakov was another really bad look as well. He got taken down really early. He did look nice on the feet while it was there, but got taken down quite easily, and on bottom position just got caught with these massive ground and pound strikes from Bakov. Ultimately had him out at the end of the first round just from these massive ground and pound shots. Bad look for him. despite recent performances, Reese does have his moments. His fight against Jose Daniel Medina was actually quite good. He beat up on Medina for the whole fight. Medina has a really good chin. It was probably the only thing keeping him in this fight. Ultimately took a 30-27 through Medina not really throwing back at all, and Reese just beating up on him the whole fight. So he does have moments, particularly in the striking. His opponent, Sedriques Dumas, most recently lost to Michael Olasejchik, where instantly in the first round, Olasejchik just started moving forward, started schooling Dumas on the feet, knocked him down with a massive left hook very early on, followed up with some ground and pound and put him away. But I don't take this loss as the worst. I think Olasejchik is on a bit of a resurgence at the moment ever since training with the Fighting Nerds. So it's not the worst of losses in my opinion. His fight before that against Dennis Tillulin, he did actually manage to win, where it was decently close round to round. Dumas was slightly better in the striking, landing the bigger shots consistently. Tillulin was making it pretty close with the grappling, but eventually throughout the fight, Dumas did start to take over there as well, and ultimately took it at 29-28. Dumas is very on and off though. He does win one, lose one, win one, lose one usually. His fight before that against Sultan Ruzabov ended in the first when, after not much volume, Ruzabov slightly grazes the eye of Dumas. Looked like an eye poke somewhat, but Dumas starts complaining to the ref they got eye poked, and while he is complaining, he gets caught with a big shot, dropped and put away with some ground and pound. Weird finish. It was kind of controversial whether it would have happened if Dumas wasn't complaining to the ref, and it was a pretty evident eye poke, but still. But in this fight, while Reese does look good in most of his fights, particularly when it stays on the feet, I'm really concerned about his grappling. He usually gets taken down and on bottom position doesn't really have a solid way to get back to the feet. Meanwhile, Dumas is pretty well rounded. He has some pretty good grappling. It's not really his main strength, but I think in a fight where he knows that he can get the advantage in that area, he will take it. And with someone with only $13 in his bank account coming into this fight, I think he'll be looking for any way to win. So for that reason, I think I'm going to go with Sedriques Dumas for this one. I'm going to say by around 2 TKO. Next up on the card is Jesus Aguilar versus Luis Gurule. So Aguilar most recently took on Rafael Estevan, where Aguilar really struggled with the takedowns early on. Estevan was just constantly taking him down, and in the grappling he was dominating, just holding top position, getting that control time, looking a lot better in the ground game. But Aguilar did start to comfortably take the third back in the striking. It's just that he didn't really have a chance earlier, but in the third he did manage to outstrike his way to take that round, but ultimately couldn't take back those last two. Ultimately lost at 29-28 just through being controlled on the ground on bottom position. Before that, he did pick up a really good win over Stuart Nicole at UFC 305, where after a rocky start, getting beat up on the feet, getting taken down early in the fight, when they managed to scramble back to the feet, Aguilar saw an opportunity to lock in a sneaky guillotine, took it, submitted Nicole midway through the first round, one of his best wins yet. But more times than not, Aguilar's fights are really close decisions. Some of them even going to split decision. Mateus Mendonca was another one where it went down to a really close split decision. Aguilar had a strong second round before Mendonca took the third back with his grappling. The fight ultimately came down to a super close first round that Aguilar just managed to take, but really close fight there. His opponent, Luis Gurule, debuted in the UFC off the Contender Series, where he got matched up with Ode Osborne, and in this fight, Gurule did have a really solid start. The first round was a very dominant round for him. He looked really good there. But early in the second, he got caught with a massive left hook. He got dropped really badly, finished with some ground and pound. And while Gurule did lose his one and only fight in the UFC, he showed some really good potential early on. That first round was really nice looking. Granted, Ode Osborne, I don't think is the best opponent, although recently we've seen him get close with Steve Erceg, so I don't even know. Maybe he just got some unlucky matchups. Either way, I think Louis Gurule's takedowns and wrestling will be a really strong area in this fight, especially against someone like Aguilar, who does struggle quite heavily with that threat. We've seen it in the Estevan fight. He does struggle with getting taken down and being held on position. And even on the feet, I think Gurule is able to hold his own. In fact, I think he might be a little bit stronger in the feet, just power-wise and landing impactful shots. So for that reason, I'm going to go with Louis Gurule by a decision win. Next up on the card is Tatiana Suarez versus Amanda Lemos. So Suarez most recently fought for the belt against Weili, and while she did have a really good start to the fight, she was able to get Weili down and took the first round in control time. Looked very dominant in the wrestling to start. As the rounds went on, she kept getting her takedowns denied, and she started losing really badly, particularly in the feet. She'd get beat up really badly by Weili, who's a good striker, but at the same time, Suarez didn't look particularly great in the striking. And even in the later rounds, Weili started to sort of take over in the takedowns and the wrestling. Even managed to almost submit Suarez, I think in the 4th or 5th. Ultimately winning a 49-46 over Suarez. Really bad performance from Suarez later in that fight. Before that though, Suarez was on an absolute tear. She was beating most of the competition in the division. She got a good win over Jessica Andrade to even get the title shot, where after dominating Andrade in the first round for pretty much the whole round in control time, early in the second she managed to get Andrade down, submitted her with a guillotine choke in that second round. Very impressive win over a pretty tricky opponent. And outside of the Weili fight, Suarez hasn't lost a single fight in her professional career. She's won most of her fights via submission as well. She is quite a good finisher. Against Montana De La Rosa, she found another guillotine choke where she dominated the wrestling the whole fight, but in that second round managed to find a guillotine choke out of nowhere, quickly made easy work in submitting De La Rosa with that submission, and it's clear that Suarez is the best when she's on the ground, trying to find these submission attempts. Her opponent Amanda Lemos recently got a good win at UFC 313 against Yasmin Lasindo, who at the time was riding a 4-fight win streak. She looked like a very dominant prospect, and while Lasindo was looking significantly better on the feet, she wouldn't be able to get much off because Lemos would constantly take her down round to round, hold her on bottom position, land some good ground and pound from there as well. Took her 29-28. Her fight before that she did lose. It was against Verna Jandiroba, who is a really solid opponent, and while the first round was pretty competitive, she actually kept up in the grappling with Jandiroba, which is pretty impressive. As the round went on and into the second round, Jandiroba just started dominating the wrestling, ultimately found an armbar submission, locked it in, submitted Lemos in the closing seconds of the second round. But Lemos is very solid here and there. She does pick up some impressive wins every now and then, like Mackenzie Dern at UFC 298, where on the ground the fight was really competitive, and in the striking, Amanda Lemos was landing significantly better shots, mixing it up more. Her kicks are also really nasty, and ultimately she was just dealing a lot more damage that fight, particularly to the face of Dern, to take a 29-28 decision. And while in this fight, I think Lemos will be significantly stronger in the striking, and will probably do some real damage on the feet. There are many fights in Lemos' career where she does let herself get out-wrestled, and against someone like Suarez, whose main, I'd say, skill set is her ground game wrestling and submissions, I think if the fight goes to the ground, I think Suarez will slowly start to take over in this one, and might even find a submission. She's really good at those. So for that reason, I'm going to go with Tatiana Suarez for this one. I'm going to say by round 2 submission. Next up on the card is Claudio Puelles versus Joaquim Silva. So Puelles most recently took on Perez Ziam, and while the fight was a split decision and the judges' scorecards were pretty close, I don't think it was as close as that would make you believe. There were still competitive moments. Puelles was looking really good in the grappling. He'd take Ziam down, control him, hold his back against the cage as well, taking a lot of the fight in control time. But he wasn't doing any damage, he wasn't threatening any submissions. Meanwhile, Ziam was also getting top position here and there, landing some big ground and pound, as well as on the feet, just looking way better than Puelles. Ultimately, Ziam did take that fight through, dealing more damage. Was close at moments, but still, I think it's the right call to give Ziam the win. Outside the Ziam fight, though, Puelles hasn't fought since 2022, where he took on Dan Hooker, and while there were moments for Puelles, especially on the ground, but Hooker once again isn't the greatest grappler. On the feet, though, it was day and night. Hooker was beating up on Puelles quite badly, ended up dropping him and putting him away via TKO in the second round with a nasty body kick, but outside of that was also schooling him on the feet. And back in the day, he did have some good wins. He beat Clay Guida in a back and forth grappling exchange, where ultimately he found a knee bar in the first, submitted Guida, but once again, there were some really concerning moments, particularly in the striking, where Puelles looked really bad. He kept pulling guard, kind of like Ryan Hall, where he just relies on his grappling way too heavily and does often take some massive damage as a result. So there is that concern there. His opponent for this fight, Joaquim Silva, while he did come off a loss to Drakkar Klose, losing the first 2 rounds in the striking, he did have a massive third round comeback. He dropped Klose badly. Midway through the round, did also catch him with a nasty guillotine. He locked it in really tight that Klose just managed to get out of. Lost a 29-28 decision, but the third round was really concerning for Klose. Very close fight near the end there, pun intended. His fight before that against Clay Guida was very competitive as well. He did get a 29-28 decision for that one, but it was just mainly through Silva looking that little bit better in all areas, but really struggling at moments, particularly in the second. He does kind of struggle against opponents who do mix it up a bit more. I think he likes it when they're a bit more one-sided, either in the striking or grappling. His fight against Arman Tsarukyan before that was pretty impressive though. With time, we're seeing how good Arman is. And while he did lose the first really convincingly, he got put away in the third as well, some ground and pound. There were moments though within that fight. In the second particularly, he has that sort of clip that a lot of people play when breaking down Arman, where he dazed Arman really badly with a massive right hand, had him panic shooting, had him wobbling around quite badly. Really bad look for Armin in that second round, and it showed that Silva is really nice in the striking. So I do see quite a bit of potential here from Silva, and while his record recently is a little bit worse than Puel's, his performances have been a lot better consistently, and I am worried about the one-dimensional side of Puel's, the kind of pulling guard constantly, relying so heavily on the grappling that you don't really get anything else off. And I think on the feet Silva will dominate, and even on the ground he will find an opportunity to take this one back. So for that reason I'm going to go with Joaquim Silva for this one. I'm going to say by around 3 TKO. Next up on the card we have Jose Daniel Medina versus Dusko Todorovic. So Jose Daniel Medina has had a pretty bad career in the UFC. He debuted against Zachary Reese, and in that fight he just got beat up for all 3 rounds. There were moments where he was throwing back, landing a big shot here and there, but Reese was just consistently picking away at him from distance, landing nicely, mixing up his shot selection as well with his kicks and his punches. Medina was taunting, eating the shots and sort of taunting back, but he just lost that fight through getting out-volumed consistently, picked away on the feet, lost to 30-27 through just inactivity from his part. And his fight after that wasn't much better against Ateba Gautier. He got beat up from the jump. Once again was eating these shots and taunting, but not doing much back. And then midway through the first round, he gets clipped with a massive knee, drops him really badly. He gets up and protests by like the stoppage. He was clearly not with the fight when he got knocked down badly. Really bad start to his career. His opponent, Dusko Todorovic, most recently took on Zachary Reese in a fight that, while it was a loss for him, 29-28 decision, he did have his moments. Particularly in the first round, he took Reese down pretty easily, controlled him on the ground with relative ease, really tired him out, but in the later rounds, he wasn't able to get the takedowns off as often. He was kind of getting pieced up a little bit on the feet. Nothing crazy to put him away, but he was letting the fight run away from him in the striking as it went on. Lost that one 29-28. But his performance before that against Manza Abdul Malik did expose a massive issue with his chin. I think he is really chinny, and in this fight, it looks really bad for him. He got beat up really badly in that first round before eventually getting put away with a knee straight to the head against the cage by Malik. Got dropped bad, got put away with punches. Really bad performance from him there. And while he did beat Jordan Wright, it was a really, really scary first round for him. He got beat up quite badly in the first round, and it seemed like Wright did actually punch himself out, because as the round went on into the second, Todorovic just started nailing away at Wright, started landing the bigger shots. Eventually, Wright actually kind of passed down. He got knocked down mainly just through being gassed out and then got put away, but it was more of a Wright gassing out thing than Todorovic looking like the superior striker. But despite that, I do think that he will beat Jose Daniel Medina. I think Medina does rely too heavily on having that chin and making it to a decision, that he doesn't really have that urgency to finish a fight or throw back. Meanwhile, Todorovic is pretty good on the striking. He's a pretty good wrestler as well, so if you can get Medina to the ground, I could see him controlling the fight from there. And ultimately, I think that's going to be his key to success, is mixing it up and not getting caught by Medina, but I think that's relatively easy to do. So for that reason, I'm going to go with Dusko Todorovic by a decision win for this one. And closing out the prelims, we have Alexander Hernandez versus Diego Ferreira. So Hernandez recently had a really nice win over Chase Hooper, where Hernandez kept the fight standing with his takedown defense late in the first, an area that Hooper is really not great in. And Hooper did get caught multiple times. He was throwing back here and there, but ultimately at the end of the first round, he got caught with a massive straight right, dropped him badly. With some follow-up shots, had the fight finished via TKO in the closing seconds of the first. Really good win for Hernandez there, but outside of that, his recent performances have been really less impressive. He did get a win over Kurt Holobar, but that was a really close fight. 29-28 decision for Hernandez. Honestly, some people argued that Holobar should have won that one. He was landing the bigger shots consistently. It's just that Hernandez was looking that little bit better on the feet volume-wise. He was a bit faster when it came to getting his shots off, and also in the grappling, he was usually in top position. But that was a really, really close fight. And even before that against Austin Hubbard at UFC 307, it went to a really close split decision that Hernandez did manage to take once again. But rounds 2 and 3 were insanely close, with it being roughly even striking. Hubbard wasn't really getting his grappling off as much as he probably could have and had to stand and bang, but it was still very, very close. Hernandez was landing slightly better. I thought he was doing a little bit more damage, but the strike stats were really even, so two really close performances before his dominant win. Diego Ferreira recently lost to Grant Dawson at UFC 311, where on the feet Ferreira looked really, really good. He was consistently landing big, but as the rounds went on, every round Dawson would get Ferreira down to the ground and just hold him on bottom position, nailing him with some ground and pound here and there, doing quite a bit of damage. And Fahea just wasn't really able to get back to the feet and make a statement, and ultimately lost that fight via 30-27 decision just through not getting the striking off. But Fahea has some really impressive wins before that. Like, his fight before that was against Mateusz Rebecki, where after a rough start of Fahea getting knocked down in the first, he got quite hurt badly in the first. In the second, Fahea started to come back strong and land big on Rebecki, causing some real damage to accumulate on the face of Rebecki. Before in the third, Fahea got on top position and just started nailing Rebecki with ground and pound shots, ultimately putting him away late in the third. Very impressive TKO finish comeback, especially after that first round. And even against Michael Johnson, who we've seen recently still has it, he looked really good against Zellhuber. In their fight, it was a pretty slow start to be fair, but midway through the second round, he connects with this massive overhand directly on the chin of Johnson, puts him out cold, finishes the fight via round 2 KO. Very nice win from there. And I think Fahea is really good, only losing to the top 15 caliber opponents, but anyone who is below that or just a little bit lesser skill level, I think he does usually have pretty good performances against. Meanwhile, Hernandez has had some really close fights with some really average opponents. Hubbard's not the greatest, Holliber's definitely not the greatest fighter. And I think when we compare their performances against their competition, I think Fahea is getting better wins over better competition. So for that reason, I'm going to go with Diego Fahea for this one. I'm going to say by a decision win. And now opening up the main card, we have Santiago Luna versus Quang Li. So Luna, only 6 fights within his professional career, but all 6 have ended via wins, and all 6 have been finishes as well. And he does have a nice mix of submissions with the occasional TKO, and it's very clear that he is very well rounded. He has some very solid striking, he is quite nice on the feet, he has some really quick hands, and even in the ground game, he is really nice with his submissions. He can often control his opponents if the fight does go there. So there is quite a bit of promise within this prospect. Quang Li, his opponent, debuted in the UFC against Chris Gutierrez in a fight where outside of the second, Li just didn't find really any success. He was looking good in the wrestling, but outside of that, nothing really to offer. He let himself get slowly picked away on the feet with Gutierrez kicking at range, landing these stiff jabs at range, just doing a bit more tit for tat wise, ultimately winning a 29-28 over Li. And his performance after that wasn't much better. He took on Zhao Longwei. The fight itself was a little bit closer. Long was consistently landing the better shots though, and Li was finding success in the wrestling and grappling, but not dealing much damage. And early in the third round, Long catches Li with this massive counter right hook, drops him badly, puts him away with hammer fists. Another really bad performance for Li, and it is clear that Li's best weapon is usually his ground game. He's not the strongest striker. Recently when he took on Gaston Bolaños, in the striking he was losing. Before getting Bolaños down, holding him on bottom position for a large part of the round, and before midway in the second round, Li took the back of Bolaños, submitted him with a rear naked choke. One of his better wins. He looked really good on the ground, and while Luna is stepping up on somewhat late notice and hasn't had as much experience, he does look absolutely dominant in his past fights, and I think he is well rounded enough to deal with Li's wrestling. I think he'll match him on the ground, and on the feet I think Santiago Luna will be significantly better. So for that reason, I'm going to go with Santiago Luna for this one. I'm going to say by a round 2 KO. Moving up the card, we have Kelvin Gastelum versus Dustin Stoltzfus. So Gastelum recently took on a very dangerous knockout artist in Joe Pyfer at UFC 316, and while Pyfer did win the first 2 rounds quite convincingly, he landed the much bigger shots and even dropped Gastelum twice in that first round. As the fight went on, Pyfer started to slow down very heavily, and Gastelum started to accumulate some momentum near the end, especially in the striking. He started to take that third round back quite convincingly, but ultimately lost a 29-28 decision through not taking either of the first 2. Before that though, Gastelum got a win over Daniil Rodriguez, and while the win itself was pretty impressive, it was upper weight class for Rodriguez, and outside of the constant takedowns from Gastelum, Rodriguez was keeping it really competitive on the feet. Gastelum winning a 30-27, mainly just through those constant takedowns and holding top position and getting that control time, but it was decently close. And while his wrestling did look really good in that fight, it's not something that he can often rely on. In his fight against Sean Brady, it was one-way traffic from Brady when it came to the grappling, taking Gastelum down constantly, controlling him once the fight would get to the ground, and ultimately in the third round finding a rear naked choke and submitting Gastelum with it. So Gastelum is well-rounded, but I'd say his striking is a little bit better. His opponent in this fight, Dustin Stoltzfus, his most recent performance against Nasultan Rizabov was pretty underwhelming. The fight was pretty even to start with. Stoltzfus looked good early on, particularly on the ground, but as the fight went on, Stoltzfus started getting tagged big on the feet, started getting hit with these massive shots as the fight went on. Both fighters were very gassed near the end, and neither were throwing anything great, but Rizabov ultimately took a 29-28 just through landing the better shots consistently, dealing the bit more damage. His performance before that against Marc-Andre Barriault was significantly better, with Stoltzfus looking that little bit better consistently all throughout round 1. And in the closing seconds of the round when Barriault was trying to blitz in, Stoltzfus caught him with this massive right hook, put him down badly, had him out with some ground and pound. Really nice win from there. And it's clear that Stoltzfus is a finish or get finished type of fighter. He's always pushing forward, pushing the pace. When he took on Bruno Ferreira, it also ended in the first round, where after a competitive first round, Ferreira looked a little bit better in the striking. But after the first round, Stoltzfus almost got submitted by Ferreira twice as well in that round as well. In the final 10 seconds, Stoltzfus was against the cage. Ferreira lands this massive spinning elbow, puts him out cold. Very, very good win for Ferreira. Kind of a bad look for Stoltzfus. And while Stoltzfus does present a grappling threat in his fights, with Gastelum not being the strongest in that area, Gastelum does have some pretty good takedown defense of his own and some defensive wrestling, and I think he will be a better striker when it comes between the two. Stoltzfus having a really messy striking style that often leaves him open to get caught with these shots. So for that reason, I think Kelvin Gastelum's going to take this one. I'm going to say by decision win. Next up on the card is Rafa Garcia versus Jared Gordon. So Rafa Garcia recently had a really uneventful fight with Vince Pichel, where on the feet it was super even every round. Garcia was mixing in the takedowns, especially in that first and third, which potentially pushed him over in those rounds. Garcia taking a 30-27 just through mixing it up a little bit more each round, but it was super close round to round. Nothing crazy that definitely gave him the win. His performance before that was much worse, so when he took on Grant Dawson early in the fight, Dawson took the fight to the ground early. Garcia had no answer, he just stayed on bottom position for most of the first round, getting hit with some big ground and pound as well. And in the second, after taking Garcia to the ground early, Dawson just started landing from top position with these massive shots, ended the fight via TKO midway through the second. Very good win for him there. His performance against Clay Guida before that was much better. In the fight, Garcia was allowed to stand and strike, which worked out pretty well for him, landing significantly more volume on the feet while constantly denying Guida's takedowns, taking a 30-27 just through beating up Guida on the feet, not having to worry about the ground game or anything like that. His opponent for this fight, Jared Gordon, has had a pretty on and off career, but all his losses have come from some of the best in the division. When taking on lower level competition, he usually does pretty well, like when fighting Mark Madsen at UFC 295, where at the end of the first round, Gordon backed Madsen up against the cage, landed a massive right hook that put him down, had him out badly, finished the fight with some follow-up ground and pound. A really nice finish from there. He did lose his fight after that against Nasrat Haqparast, where it was a super close split decision. Honestly, could have gone either way in my opinion. It was really, really competitive round to round. Haqparast did take that first just by looking a little bit better in the striking before Gordon came back in the second, coming down to a really close third round, which Haqparast ultimately just took, but you could honestly make an argument that Gordon won. And Gordon was back to his old performances recently against Thiago Moises. After a really dominant performance from him to start with in the grappling, taking Moises down, holding him on the ground. When he gets back to the feet late in the first, Gordon lands a massive overhand right directly on the chin of Moises, put him down, had him out really badly. Another really, really good win for Gordon. And while there have been quite a few losses recently on Gordon's record, they're all to the top of the top when it comes to the athletes within lightweight. It's Pimblets, Oliveira's, Grant Dawson's, all these big names. They're the only people he really seems to lose to. Meanwhile, Garcia has been losing to a lot of lower level fighters recently, especially competition wise, and is a little bit too reliant on his striking in my opinion. I think Gordon will expose that. I think he'll mix it up a little bit more, be able to get that takedown off and succeed there, as well as I think he is a little bit better on the feet and has a bit more finishing potential in his hands. So for that reason, I'm going to go with Jared Gordon. I'm going to say by around 1 KO for this one. And now the co-main event, Rob Font versus David Martinez. So Rob Font most recently had a really close fight with Jim Matsumoto, where Font took it through being the better of the two on the feet. He was landing way more, as well as landing the way bigger shots that were dealing a lot more damage. He managed to cut Matsumoto open, had his face swelling a little bit. Really bad look with how much Matsumoto was bleeding. But there were moments in that fight where Matsumoto was making it really close. He took Font down quite a bit. He kept the fight close through that control time, but not ultimately doing enough to take the win, but decently close fight. Font's fight before that was a little bit more impressive when he took on Kyler Phillips, where at the time, Phillips was seen as this next up-and-comer within the division, but in this fight, Font came in as a heavy underdog and managed to school Phillips on the feet. He showed the difference that experience makes when it comes to the division. While Phillips would get the occasional takedown, he wasn't able to keep Font down for very long. And back on the feet, Phillips would just not find success at all in the striking, with Font using his experience to land these nice shots, consistently being that one step ahead in the striking to take a clear 29-28 decision. And while Font did lose to Davison Figueiredo before that, to his credit, he was doing a good job at managing to take the power of Figueiredo when it came to the striking and deal his own damage back. He did ultimately lose that one by 30-27 with Figueiredo constantly taking him down, holding him down. Figueiredo's a really good wrestler as well as striking, but Font was keeping it close on the feet. He was dealing his own shots as well as taking most of the big shots from Figueiredo pretty well, so he does have those losses, but they're not the worst. His opponent for this fight, David Martinez, looked really good in his debut recently against Simon Oliveira, who granted isn't the craziest of competition. He got a really nice knockout in the first round, but once again, it was against an opponent who hasn't fought in 2 years, is 0-2 within the UFC. I mean, yeah, it was kind of a layup for him to get into those UFC, like, upper levels. But he's been boosted way too high. And I think while it is still a mystery where Martinez stands in the UFC, we haven't seen enough from him to definitively determine whether it's 15 material or below that. I think he's getting thrown in the deep end way too quickly with someone like Rob Font, who's really tricky to figure out. He's really smart when it comes to his tactical striking, how he manages himself during a fight. And I think that Martinez won't give him anything that he hasn't seen before. And ultimately, while Martinez could come out there and just land a massive shot, put him out flush, I think it's way more likely that Font will just overwhelm Martinez, tire him out as the fight goes on, keep landing these nice shots from distance, rack up that volume, and ultimately just beat Martinez through mixing it up and using his experiences to stay that one step ahead consistently. So for that reason, I'm going to go with Rob Font, and I'm going to say by a decision win. And now the main event, Diego Lopes versus Jean Silva. So Diego Lopes most recently took on Alexander Volkanovski for the belt at UFC 314, and while he did lose a pretty clear decision, he got 49-46, or I think you could even argue 48-47. He did still lose that one pretty bad. There were moments though where it was really competitive, especially in the pocket. He would land really nice on Volk, take some damage himself, but he showed that he has quite a good chin in that fight. And in the second, he even managed to knock Volk down quite badly. In the fourth, had Volk really hurt as well. Ultimately, Volk just looked that little bit better. He had kind of a perfect performance that night, consistently doing the right thing and looking that little bit better in the striking. Still a close fight. Before that, Lopes did take on Brian Ortega, where he absolutely dominated Ortega. Early in the first, he borderline knocked Ortega out with this two-piece combo. Woke him up with a follow-up shot, in my opinion, but maybe he was still in it. But either way, from there, just chased Ortega down, even wrangled him around in the wrestling, managed to like throw him around for a bit in the first. And then just from there, just chased him down, landed these big shots on him consistently, swelled the face and caused a massive amount of damage to Brian Ortega over the 3 rounds. Took a 30-27 decision, really good win for him there. And while his fight before that against Dan Ige was a little concerning, with Ige having a really strong round, even hurting Lopes quite badly in that third, there were a lot of things going into that. Lopes did look better as well in those first 2 rounds, but on top of that, it was such a late minute step up, change of opponent as well from Ortega, who is definitely much more of a wrestler compared to Ige. And not only was it upper weight class for Ortega at lightweight, he had to go up again to welterweight for Ige, so I don't really rate that fight too much on determining how good Lopes is, but it still was a good look for him, the fact that he won that. His opponent, Jean Silva, came into the UFC, and his first fights, he made a statement. He got a bunch of quick finishes, showed some real potential, and then eventually showed even more potential when he moved up to lightweight on short notice and beat up on Drew Dober. Granted, he wasn't able to finish Dober. Dober has a pretty good chin, but consistently he was just landing massive to the head of Dober, was taking a decent bit of punishment back. But it was ultimately the punches, the elbows, the swelling of the face, the cuts above the eyes of Dober that ultimately stopped the fight in the 3rd round via doctor stoppage. A really good win for him that showed the versatility of Silva. And his follow-up fight after that, back at featherweight, was also just as dominant. Against Melsik Bagdasaryan, he absolutely dominated him on the feet, constantly stayed out of range and would blitz in, land these big shots, ultimately landing a massive right hand that dropped Bagdasaryan badly, put him away with some ground and pound, finished the fight late in the first. Really impressive win there. And recently, he got his first ranked opponent in Bryce Mitchell, and he managed to pull off a really surprising 2nd round submission of all things. A lot of people were worried about how his grappling would fare. A lot of people were worried that Bryce would get him down, and it would be exposed that Silva was a very heavy, striking-reliant fighter with no ground game. But in this fight, he managed to submit Mitchell with a 2nd round ninja choke. It should be noted, though, that in that 1st round, at the very start, it was looking really concerning. Mitchell was actually landing quite nicely on Silva. Really strong start striking-wise for Mitchell, which isn't usually a strong suit. But either way, Silva managed to get that 2nd round submission. 2nd round was a really dominant round for him. And despite that, I am a little concerned for Silva. Mitchell isn't the toughest of opponents. He's actually quite a small featherweight. We've seen recently he moved down to bantamweight. And at the start of that fight, he was landing nicely on Silva, and we didn't really see that bravado from Silva in that fight to start with. He wasn't taunting in that 1st round as much compared to the 2nd. And I think against someone like Lopes, I mean, Lopes is really, really dangerous, especially in the pocket. If Silva tries to meet him in the pocket, I think it will be a 50-50 exchange of damage. And Lopes does have a pretty good chin, so I can't see Silva getting him out of there quickly. And I think the minute that Lopes starts landing these big shots on Silva, the demeanor's going to change. I don't think he's going to be taunting as much. I don't think he's going to be jumping around and being all explosive. I think he's going to have to be a lot more tactical, going to have to be a lot more careful of getting clipped with these big shots. And on top of that, Lopes has a really solid ground game. I mean, he has taken some of the best fighters in wrestling to the ground, especially Movsar Evlov in his debut on short notice. He got Movsar to the ground, almost submitted him with a something to do with the legs, where he split like the thigh. Almost got him with that, didn't quite get it, but still showed some really good ground game there. And yeah, I'm just worried about Silva being thrown against someone so versatile, someone so good with his striking, someone so powerful as Lopes. And I think Lopes will take this one. So I'm going to go with Diego Lopes for this one. I'm going to say by round 2 KO. So that's it, guys. Those are all my predictions for UFC Fight Night, Lopes versus Silva. Right now on the screen are a compilation of all of my predictions. All of Cam's predictions are also up there right now. This card, it's alright. I mean, I really like the main event. I think out of the main events this year, this is one of the most hype ones, especially with the recent Fighting Nerds downfall, whether Silva can pull it back. And while initially I was thinking Silva has this one definitively in the bag, I thought Silva was going to knock out Lopes. As time's gone on, I have started to sort of underappreciate Lopes and realize that, man, Lopes is also pretty good. So really excited to see this one. I think this is one of the better Fight Night main events. Outside of that, the card itself isn't particularly stacked. There's not really any crazy amazing fights, but still excited to see what happens this week, and I'll see you guys in another video. Bye bye.